Have you ever felt like the more you try to control your life, the more it slips through your fingers? What if the path to true peace isn't about pushing harder, but letting go more wisely? And what if ancient Stoic philosophy holds the quiet key to everything you've been forcing? Welcome back to the show, your space for slow wisdom in a fast world. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we're diving deep into something that touches all of us. The feeling of pushing, striving, forcing life to go a certain way, only to feel more tired, more anxious, more out of sync. If that resonates, you're not alone. We live in a culture that glorifies effort and overlooks ease, that rewards hustle but forgets harmony. We're told to take charge, be aggressive, seize every opportunity, but few ever ask, what's the cost of forcing things that aren't meant to be? In this episode, I'll share 10 timeless Stoic lessons that will help you stop forcing and start flowing. These are not abstract theories. These are tools for real life. For quiet mornings, for tense conversations, for the moments when nothing makes sense. Let's walk together through wisdom that's lasted over 2,000 years and still speaks louder than most modern advice ever will. Lesson 1. Accept what you cannot control. Have you ever tried to fix something over and over again, only to realize it was never truly yours to fix? Maybe it was someone else's behavior. Maybe it was a relationship, a missed opportunity, or the way a chapter in your life ended before you were ready. We waste so much energy trying to bend life to our will. But the Stoics remind us that peace doesn't come from control, it comes from clarity. And clarity begins with understanding. What is and what is not within your power? Epictetus, a man who lived much of his life in slavery and hardship, offered one of the most liberating teachings of all time. Some things are up to us, and some things are not. This one sentence, if fully understood, could end so much of our anxiety. You can't control whether people like you. You can't control whether your plans succeed. You can't control what others think, say, or do. But you can control your mindset. You can control your choices. You can control your reactions. And that's where your true power lives. I remember a season in my life where I was desperately trying to hold on to a friendship that was clearly drifting away. I sent long messages, initiated hangouts, and constantly analyzed what I did wrong. But nothing changed until one day I read Epictetus's words. I realized I couldn't control the other person's willingness to stay. All I could do was show up with kindness and let go with grace. It was in that moment I felt the knot in my chest begin to loosen. So ask yourself today, what are you gripping that isn't yours to hold? What could you release, not out of defeat, but out of wisdom? Because acceptance isn't weakness. It's the beginning of strength, and when you stop trying to force life to behave, you finally give it room to unfold. Lesson 2. Nature has its own timing. So after accepting what you cannot control, the next natural step is to also accept when things unfold. Because sometimes it's not the outcome that's wrong, it's just the timing. You've likely had a season in life where you did everything right. You showed up, you worked hard, you were kind, you were consistent, and yet nothing seemed to move. You began to wonder, why is nothing happening? Or worse, am I doing something wrong? The Stoics would gently remind you, patience is part of the process. Epictetus said, no great thing is created suddenly. Think about a seed. You don't plant it and then yell at the soil the next day for not sprouting. You water, you wait, you trust the mystery beneath the surface. And one day when the conditions are right, not when you decide, it blooms. Life works the same way. But modern life has trained us to believe that progress should be instant, that everything should respond to our will, our pace, our pressure. And so when something delays, we take it as failure. But here's the deeper truth. Delay doesn't mean denial. Sometimes the space between your effort and your reward is where the real growth is happening. Not just outside, but inside you. In my own life, I remember a creative project that I poured my heart into. I launched it with high hopes, but crickets. No one responded. It felt like shouting into a void. I questioned everything. I almost quit. But something in me whispered, keep going. Trust the rhythm. Months later, that same project quietly began to resonate with people. It didn't explode, but it grew roots. And so did I. Because here's what I realized. We're not just waiting for results. We're becoming the person who's ready for them. So when things feel slow, don't panic. Don't force. Pause. Breathe. Remind yourself. Nature is never in a hurry, and yet everything gets done. The oak tree doesn't compare itself to the bamboo. The river doesn't rush to the ocean. It flows, and so can you. Let your timeline be sacred. Let your process be enough. And let the unfolding happen without your constant pushing. Because in the stillness between effort and reward, a quieter miracle is forming. Your patience. Lesson 3. Resistance creates suffering. When things don't happen in our timing, when people don't behave the way we hoped, when life throws curveballs, we often meet those moments not with acceptance but with resistance. And it's in that resistance that most of our suffering is born. You see, pain is inevitable. Life will bring discomfort. But suffering, that extra layer of emotional struggle, often comes from the story we tell ourselves about the pain. And the Stoics understood this well. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." Think about that for a moment. It's not the breakup that destroys us, it's the thought, "I'll never be loved again." It's not the job loss, it's the belief, "I'm a failure." It's not the traffic, it's the rage-filled narrative. "This always happens to me." The event is neutral. What hurts us is our resistance to it. Let me share something personal. A few years ago, I was passed over for a promotion I had worked hard for. I smiled on the outside, but inside I was furious. I felt overlooked, betrayed, defeated. But here's the truth. The pain wasn't in the decision. They had their reasons. The real suffering came from my resistance to what had happened. From my mental spiral. "They don't value me, I'll never move forward. What's the point of trying?" I had created a story, and I was living inside that storm. When I returned to Marcus Aurelius's wisdom, I realized the power I still held, the power to choose a different story, one rooted in growth, one rooted in letting go. So I asked myself, what if this wasn't rejection, but redirection? Suddenly, everything shifted. The event didn't change, but I did. And you can do the same. Because every time something painful happens, you have two options. Fight it, question it, obsess over it, feel it, learn from it, release the narrative. Stoicism isn't about being numb, it's about being free. Free from false stories, free from spiraling thoughts, free from the unnecessary weight we carry through resistance. So the next time something hurts, pause. Ask, what story am I adding here? And more importantly, is that story helping me grow or keeping me stuck? When we stop resisting life, we stop suffering. We begin to face reality with gentleness. We let pain pass through, instead of building walls around it. And that kind of peace, it's always available. Lesson 4. Detachment is strength, not apathy. After we release resistance, we often encounter another challenge. Attachment to people, to outcomes, to how we thought life should unfold. And yet the Stoics remind us that strength doesn't come from holding tightly, but from learning to let go with grace. Many people hear the word detachment and mistake it for coldness, apathy, a turning away from life. But Stoic detachment is something entirely different. It's not a refusal to care, it's caring deeply, without losing yourself in the process. Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." And bravery in this context means the courage to hold life loosely, to love, to work, to strive, but not to cling. I used to believe that letting go meant giving up, that if I didn't grip every detail, every relationship, every goal, I was being careless or weak. But the more I lived, the more I realized, the tighter I held, the more I suffered. A friend once shared this image with me, holding sand in your palm. If you keep your hand open, the sand rests gently. But if you squeeze, it spills through your fingers. The same is true for life. We try to force certainty in relationships, obsess over career outcomes, control how others perceive us, and in doing so, we often lose our center. Detachment, instead, invites us to engage fully with the moment, but without letting it define us. It allows us to love someone without needing to possess them, to strive for excellence without making our self-worth depend on the outcome, show up without needing to be seen a certain way. Letting go doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you start caring better, from a place of wisdom rather than fear. So how do you practice detachment? You begin with awareness. You notice when you're clinging, when your peace becomes hostage to an external result, when your mood is controlled by someone else's behavior, and then you breathe. You step back. You say, I am not this moment. I am the one witnessing it. That space is your power, because true freedom isn't found in indifference. It's found in presence, unburdened by expectation. So don't harden your heart. Open it, but don't let it be chained to what it cannot control. This is what the Stoics meant by inner freedom. You show up, fully alive, fully engaged, but you no longer break when things don't go your way. You bend, you release, you remain. Lesson 5. Stillness is the antidote to forcing. After learning to loosen our grip through detachment, the next lesson invites us into an even deeper space, stillness. Because once we stop clinging, we're left with a question: how do I move forward now? And the answer, surprisingly, is not always to move, but to be still. We live in a world obsessed with motion. Speed is celebrated. Productivity is idolized. Stillness, on the other hand, is often mistaken for laziness. But in the Stoic tradition, stillness is not inaction. It's intentional non-reaction. It's presence. It's power. Marcus Aurelius, one of history's most powerful leaders, often retreated into silence. Amid wars, politics, and personal grief, he returned again and again to one internal sanctuary. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul. In that silence, he found clarity, and so can we. Let me tell you about a period in my life when I felt stuck. Everything felt urgent. My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Emails piled up. I had 5 projects on my plate, none of them moving the way I wanted. My instinct? Push harder. Work later. Speed up. But the harder I pushed, the more scattered I became. Until one morning I did something radical. I stopped, I turned everything off, I sat in a chair, I closed my eyes, I breathed. The first few minutes were torture. My mind screamed at me, "You're wasting time." But after a while something shifted. I started to see what actually mattered, what I could release, where my energy was being drained. That single hour of stillness gave me more clarity than an entire week of hustling. Stillness is not passive, it's generative. It's where your intuition gets louder than your fear. It's where you hear yourself again. The Stoics practiced stillness not to escape the world, but to move through it with more wisdom. Stillness allowed them to respond, not react, to act from principle, not panic. So, if you're in a season where nothing seems to work, where effort only brings exhaustion, try this. Stop. Be still. Listen, ask yourself, what am I forcing that doesn't need to be forced? What truth is waiting for me in the silence? Because sometimes the most powerful move is no move at all. Let go of the urgency, step into presence, and watch how life begins to organize itself around your calm. Lesson 6. Repetition is greater than force. After we find stillness, a natural question follows. What do we do next? And the Stoics would offer a quiet answer. You return. Not to forcing, not to pushing, but to small, steady acts repeated with intention. In a world addicted to breakthroughs and big wins, we often overlook the quiet power of repetition. We think success comes from dramatic effort. But the Stoics knew that transformation happens in the daily grind, not in the grand gesture. Epictetus said, "You become what you give your attention to." And what you give your attention to every day shapes who you are becoming. Let me share a story. Years ago, I tried to build a daily meditation practice. I started strong, 20 minutes a day, every day, for a week. Then I missed a day, then 2. Then I quit. I thought I had failed, but later I tried again. This time just 2 minutes a day. Not perfect, not dramatic, just consistent. and something changed. I stopped waiting for motivation. I stopped chasing ideal conditions. I just showed up. Over time, those 2 minutes grew. And more importantly, I grew. Because I was no longer relying on force, I was relying on rhythm. We underestimate how powerful we become when we do something small over and over again. The Stoics practiced this through journaling, morning reflections, evening reviews. They didn't wait for crisis to practice clarity. They trained for it every day. So what does this mean for you? It means if you want peace, don't force it in one big act. Return to it each morning. If you want strength, don't wait for a heroic moment. Build it through small, repeated choices every day. It's not about being perfect. It's about being present, again and again. We don't shape our lives through pressure. We shape them through patterns. Ask yourself, what's one small action I can take today, something so small it's almost invisible, powerful if done every day, and then do it. Not because you feel inspired, but because repetition creates identity. Force burns out, but rhythm builds up. And if you stay the course long enough, you'll look back one day and realize you've become someone new. Not through forcing, but through faithful repetition. Lesson 7. Choose virtue. Over emotion, now that we've grounded ourselves in the quiet power of repetition, it's time to turn inward again, toward something even deeper, our inner compass. Because consistency matters. But what you're consistent with matters even more. In the world of Stoicism, one idea rises above all others. Live by virtue, not emotions, not impulses, not what feels good or urgent or easy in the moment, but principle, integrity, character. And this is where many of us get stuck. We confuse our feelings with our truth. We think, if I feel it strongly, it must be right. But feelings are like weather. They pass, they shift, they deceive. Seneca once wrote, "A man is as miserable as he thinks he is," and I'd add, "A man is as reactive as he allows himself to be." Let me take you into a moment from my own life, a disagreement with someone I care about deeply. The conversation was tense. I felt misunderstood, angry, defensive. My emotions were screaming, "Raise your voice. Prove your point, walk away." But something, maybe the little Stoic in me, whispered, "Pause." So I breathed. I remembered that I could act from my feelings or from my values. I chose to listen. I chose patience. I chose to respond from the person I wanted to be, not the emotion I happened to be feeling, and everything changed, not because the conversation was perfect, but because I didn't betray my deeper self. You see, living by virtue isn't about moral superiority, it's about freedom, because when you act from values like kindness, honesty, humility, you're no longer a prisoner of the mood of the moment. You become trustworthy, not just to others but to yourself. This is what the Stoics meant when they talked about becoming unshakable. It doesn't mean you don't feel. It means you're no longer controlled by what you feel. So next, time you're triggered, upset, overwhelmed, pause. Ask, what would my highest self do right now? And then do that. Not because it's easy, but because it's who you want to become. Emotions are data, not commands. Virtue is your anchor, and the more you act from that place, the more peace you'll find. Not just on the outside, but deep within. Lesson 8. Don't cling to identity after. Choosing virtue over fleeting emotion, you'll inevitably be drawn toward a deeper transformation. But here's the paradox. To truly evolve, you must be willing to let go of the person you think you are. One of the most overlooked obstacles to peace is our attachment to identity. The stories we tell ourselves. I'm not good at that. This is just who I am. I've always done it this way. But what if that very story is what's keeping you stuck? Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who faced unrelenting challenges, offered this: waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one. The Stoics were not interested in clinging to labels or fixed roles. They were more concerned with becoming, not defending. They understood that identity isn't static, it's fluid. It's earned through action, not inherited by history. I remember working in a career that looked impressive from the outside, but inside I felt misaligned. But I told myself a story. This is who I am. I worked hard for this. I can't start over now. That story kept me in place for years, until one day I realized I was more loyal to the identity than to my inner truth. So I asked myself, what if I stopped trying to protect a version of me that no longer feels alive? And in that moment I felt something terrifying and liberating. I was free to evolve, free to say that served me once, but I'm no longer that person. We don't get inner peace by locking ourselves into a fixed version of self. We get it by shedding old skins again and again. So let me ask you, what identity are you defending that's outgrown its usefulness? What would happen if you let it go? You are not your past. You are not your job title. You are not your worst mistake or your biggest achievement. You are the quiet, courageous self beneath it all, ready to rise. Don't be afraid to rewrite your story. Because the most stoic act isn't staying the same. It's having the wisdom to know when it's time to become someone new. Lesson 9. Surrender is not weakness. Once you've let go of the identity that no longer fits you, a deeper letting go begins to take shape. The surrender of control, of certainty, of knowing what comes next. And it's here that we confront one of the most misunderstood virtues: surrender. For many, surrender feels like giving up, like losing, like weakness. But in the Stoic worldview, surrender is not a collapse. It's an act of supreme strength. Because what requires more power? Clenching your fist out of fear or opening your palm in trust? Seneca once wrote, "A wise man is content with his lot, whatever it may be, without wishing for what he has not." That's surrender, not passivity, but alignment. A quiet decision to stop fighting with life. I remember a time when everything in my life felt like it was unraveling. Relationships shifting, plans falling through, dreams on pause. I kept trying to fix, to analyze, to force something to move. But the more I tried, the more everything tightened. Like wrestling with a current I couldn't outswim. And then one morning I broke, not from weakness, but from exhaustion. I sat down alone in silence and whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to the sky, the universe, to myself. I surrender. Not because I give up, but because I trust there's something bigger at work here. That surrender didn't solve everything, but it shifted everything. I began to breathe again. I stopped blaming. I started listening, not to my fears, but to my life. And slowly clarity returned, not because I forced it, but because I stopped resisting it. You see, surrender isn't letting go of effort. It's letting go of attachment to outcome. It's doing your part, and then releasing what is not your burden to carry. The Stoics didn't believe in controlling fate. They believed in aligning with it, and that's where your peace lives, not in domination, but in participation. So the next time life feels heavy, ask yourself, what am I gripping that I could surrender? Where am I confusing control with care? You don't have to know what comes next, you just have to meet this moment. Open, honest, steady. Because real power isn't in forcing life to bend to you. It's in learning how to bend with life. And remain whole. Let surrender soften you. Let it sharpen your trust. Let it lead you, not into giving up, but into growing deeper roots. Lesson 10. True peace begins within. And now, we return to the heart of it all. After surrendering our need for control, identity, and timing, we arrive where the Stoics always meant to lead us, back to ourselves. Because in the end, all the lessons, all the letting go, all the philosophical practice, they're not about escaping the world. They're about realizing that the world does not have to define you. Peace isn't something we chase out there. It's something we remember in here. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The happiness of your life depends upon the quality of your thoughts." In a world of chaos, peace becomes a radical act. And that act begins inside. You see, we're conditioned to seek peace in the external, a perfect morning routine, a stable job, a relationship without conflict, a city that finally feels like home. But all of these things shift, they dissolve, they end. And if our inner world is tied to outer conditions, we will always be at their mercy. Real peace, the kind that sustains you when plans fall apart, when grief visits, when you're tired and unsure, comes from something deeper. It comes from knowing that no matter what happens, you can return to yourself, to the breath, to your values, to the still place behind the noise. I remember one night, during a particularly hard season of my life, I stood alone on my balcony. Everything felt uncertain. My future, my work, my sense of self. But in that quiet darkness, I did something simple. I placed my hand on my chest, closed my eyes, and whispered, "Right here, right now, I have peace." Nothing had changed on the outside, but I had returned to the place within me that never left. The Stoics weren't trying to become untouchable. They were trying to become unshakable. And that comes not from coldness, but from connection. So how do you begin cultivating this inner peace? You sit with yourself. You notice your thoughts without clinging to them. You choose presence over projection. You live in alignment with your deepest truths, not for applause, but for integrity. Because when your soul is at peace with itself, no storm can unseat you. You become the calm in the chaos. You become the space between reaction and response. You become what the world so desperately needs, but cannot give you. And that's freedom. So the next time you're tempted to search for peace in the next achievement, the next person, the next moment, pause. Return to your breath. Return to your truth. Return to the quiet knowing. True peace begins within. You've made it to the end of this journey, but perhaps it's really just the beginning. 10 Stoic lessons. 10 quiet truths, each one a door to peace if you choose to walk through it. Now the real practice begins, not in your mind, but in your moments, when you're stuck in traffic, when someone disappoints you, when life doesn't go your way. Those are your classrooms now. That's where your philosophy lives, not in quotes, but in choices. So pause today, reflect, pick one lesson that resonated, and bring it with you, not as a shield, but as a guide. And above all, remember this: you are not powerless. You don't need to force anything to prove your worth. Your calm is your courage. Your stillness is your strength. Your peace is your power. If this episode helped you feel more centered, please consider doing 3 simple things. First, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes. We go deeper into Stoic and spiritual truths every week. Second, leave a comment below. Tell me which lesson spoke to you most and how you plan to apply it. I read everyone, and your words inspire others too. And finally, share this with someone you care about, someone who's been trying too hard, pushing too much. Maybe they just need a reminder that peace is still possible. Thank you for being here. Thank you for walking this path. And until next time, breathe deeply, live wisely, and never forget, you were never meant to force your way through life. You were meant to flow through it with grace.